So now let's get into the neuroscience part of things. So again, we are going to have a couple of big words. Don't get intimidated. Stick with me, and by the end, you'll understand everything, and it won't be a big deal. Okay? So first thing is the ventral medial prefrontal cortex and the medial orbitofrontal cortex. Now, the activation of this region is associated with the perceived value of the reward. So I want to kind of highlight the operative word there, the perceived value. You know, sometimes there's perfect alignment between the perception of a value and the value itself, but oftentimes there's not. So perception is incredibly important here. Now, there's something called positive prediction error and a negative prediction error. A positive prediction error is when the perception of value is actually less than the value that you receive. So you say, I'm going to have this food and it's probably going to be pretty tasty, but then you have it and it's fantastic. Okay, it's way better than you anticipated. So the reward you got was higher than what you predicted. Positive prediction error is generally associated or more strongly associated with success, especially when we're talking about behavior modulation. Now, there's also something called a negative prediction error. A negative prediction error is essentially the reverse. Negative prediction error is generally more associated with recidivism or failure of a particular behavior change. One of the reasons for this, or I'll kind of give you an example of this in action. Let's say you're not exercising, okay? You're not exercising, you're not dieting, and you want to lose 30 pounds, okay? So you decide, I'm going to start dieting, I'm going to start exercising, I'm going to go to bed at a decent time. You start making all these changes. You think because I've done nothing, I'm doing nothing right now and my weight is going nowhere. But if I start doing things, you start dieting, you start sleeping at a better time, maybe you start going out for a walk, maybe you start exercising regularly. Let's say you do those 5 things. You went from doing 0 things to 5 things. And because of that, you're like, man, I'm probably going to lose a very large amount of weight. I'm probably going to lose, let's say, 5 pounds in the first week. And then I'll probably lose, 20 pounds in the first 6 or 8 weeks. Okay. Then the first week rolls around, you lose 0 weight. Third week rolls around, you lost a pound. Okay. That's a negative prediction error. Now, what was your prediction based off of? Do you have any experience with how long it's going to take to lose weight? Do you have any experience with actually monitoring the data so you can understand how your adherence actually stacks up to the results? Most people would answer no to those questions, okay? Yet you have all of these arbitrary expectations. And because your results don't meet your arbitrary expectations, that is a negative prediction error. And therefore you're like, well, fuck it, this doesn't work, I'm quitting. That example is so common among people who want to lose weight. It's also incredibly common among people who want to build muscle or build strength or pretty much anything with fitness. That's not how this works, okay? So if you're going to make predictions, you need to have a lot of information, you need to have a lot of experience, you need to understand how it all applies to your specific context. And most people just don't have that. So it's no wonder that people consistently make prediction errors in their own situations. And if you're making a bunch of prediction errors, you're probably going to be pretty demoralized because, again, you went from doing 0 things to doing 5 things. That's a whole lot more work, but you're not seeing the results that you want. But, okay, maybe you did start eating healthy, but are you in a calorie deficit? In this example, no, you're not. So yes, you're working hard, you're eating really healthy, but you're not in a fucking calorie deficit. Are you exercising in the gym? Yes, you are. But are you actually training with a high level of intensity, a high level of output? No, you're not. Are you going for a walk every day? Yes, you are. And that's actually something that's really, really good for you. But it's not quite enough to push you over that edge to create that caloric deficit. And those are really, really good things. But again, not enough in isolation to create the weight loss that you want. So a lot of the things you're doing are good, but they don't necessarily meet the minimum viable threshold for you to reach that escape velocity to actually see the results that you want. So if you were to continue doing those exact things, you're probably not going to get anywhere. However, if you implement the same basic premise of the intervention, so you adopt some sort of dietary structure, some exercise protocol, you maintain good hydration practice, you get good sleep hygiene, but you do them all properly, man, you're going to see a completely different outcome. So same 5 things, executed in completely different ways, all of a sudden you're producing way, way better results. But again, you couldn't necessarily do that because you didn't have the pre-existing information. You didn't have the experience to understand how to apply it. You didn't even know whether or not you were doing things right or wrong at the gym. You're just kind of doing stuff and you're like, okay, yeah, I lifted the weights. And it's like, I guess, but you're training with 0 intensity. So you're probably not going to really do anything that's very productive. Like, yes, I would say that going and doing all those things are better than nothing for sure, but it's not enough to get you the results that you want. And ultimately, that's what we're really looking for. So anytime I'm working with clients, it is not just a matter of here's your programs, go and have fun. There has to be a huge educational component. And this is one of the reasons why I decided to actually put this course out for free, because this is something I'm doing for my existing clients as well as for just people in general. And hopefully this really is going to be a game changer for you, for your results, because most people don't have enough education, they don't have enough information in order to apply it effectively in their own situation. Then we go to the lateral orbitofrontal cortex, and this is associated with credit to a particular stimuli. So this is kind of dealing with credit assignment, okay? Then we look at the ACC, or the anterior cingulate cortex. This is associated with weighing the costs and the benefits of decision making. So this action has X benefit at Y cost, okay? So how much effort is it going to take to get this reward? That's essentially what we're talking about here, all right? And a lot of the times, again, when people are making these determinations, they don't have enough information. And I've had people walk up to me and ask me these questions before as well. And they're like, hey, what do you do for your diet? What do you do for your training? You know, I'm trying to really get more serious about this. And the thing is, what I do is not what they should do. Maybe way down the road that might be in the realm of what they should do, but certainly not right now, because we're at two completely different levels. I did not start my fitness journey by doing all the things that I'm doing right now. Absolutely not. If I would have done that, I would have lasted 2 weeks and been like, fuck this, I can't do it. It's way too much. And in fact, it's probably going to be counterproductive to do all of these things simultaneously, because if you have 50 different levers to pull, but all you need to pull is 2 in order to see great progress, only pull 2, because then you're going to see progress for a longer period of time. Then once that progress stalls out, then pull the 3rd lever, ride that wave of progress again, then pull that lever. If you pull all levers at once, you will have no novel stimulus once you plateau. So you need to make sure that, 1, you're not just doing everything at once, because there is a time and a place to apply things that are going to basically yield substantially better results, as opposed to just doing everything at once. So for me to tell this individual to do all of the things that I'm doing, it would be wildly inappropriate. But because you've inappropriately determined or perceived that this is the difficulty to get this reward and this is the timeline, now you have an incorrect attribution, okay? So essentially, your ability to weigh the benefits and the costs are not correct. And because they're not correct, you can't accurately say, that's not something I'm willing to do, because you don't have the right information. And people do that all the time, and they sabotage themselves. So there's also something called homeostatic hunger versus hedonic hunger, okay? And these are different signaling mechanisms. So homeostatic hunger can be thought of like physiological hunger, okay? So you actually need nutrients, you actually need calories, okay? I'm actually hungry, I need food to sustain myself. Then there is hedonic hunger, okay, which is purely a pleasure-seeking type of hunger. It's purely the reward mechanism that you're trying to kind of activate, okay? So here's an example of this. Let's say you come to me and you say, hey, I'm really hungry right now. Do you have anything to eat? And I say, sure, I've got a bunch of chicken breast and ground beef. And you say, I'm more so like really hungry for a pizza. Okay, you're not hungry then, right? In most cases, you're just not hungry. That's not physiological hunger, that's hedonic hunger, okay? Because if you were actually hungry, you'd be like, oh, sure, that's fine, that works for me. And you'd have the chicken or the ground beef or whatever it might be. But you're not hungry for just calories, you're hungry for pizza, which is a very specific thing. You never really crave pizza because you need pizza. Like, that's not really a nutrient dense, high quality food item, right? So it's not like you're going to crave that over like pizza over chicken breast or beef or whatever. That's in most cases just a pure reward for you, okay? And so those are some of the differences between those two things. Now, we'll talk a little bit about leptin and ghrelin. Research has shown that individuals who are obese or substantially overweight tend to have disrupted hunger signaling, okay, which goes into the leptin and ghrelin that we're going to talk about. And they tend to display much more reward-seeking behavior when it comes to food consumption. So very, very common for overweight people to intentionally seek out highly palatable, calorically dense foods. generally combinations of carbohydrates and fats. So fat, carbohydrates, and salt. Those combinations tend to be really addictive in nature. Now, coming back to leptin and ghrelin. Now, these are hormones in the body and they serve various functions. However, because we're not going to get super deep into the weeds, we're just going to talk about it as it pertains to hunger signaling. So satiety and hunger. Generally speaking, leptin is like the satiety hormone. So when leptin increases, you generally feel more satiated, you're not super hungry. Ghrelin is a hunger hormone. When ghrelin, kind of increases, you're feeling a little bit more hungry. Now, obese individuals, and I had mentioned this a moment ago, generally show hormonal dysregulation in diurnal variation in leptin and ghrelin levels, as well as leptin resistance. Okay, so let's say you need to eat a certain amount of calories or whatever because that's what your body needs. Okay, now generally what's going to happen is you're going to consume food and your body kind of has this normal reaction, right? So leptin increases and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, I'm satiated. And that's when, that's a signal telling your body to kind of put the brakes on it. Generally, obesity leads to a whole host of maladaptations and, like physiological conditions and different issues and things like that. I would suspect that this is largely one of them, as opposed to this being something that actually leads people to it. I just don't buy it. So we can discuss dopaminergic signaling too. So again, dopamine essentially leads to selective reinforcement of behavior and sort of goal-directed motivation. Okay, so goal-directed motivation is really important as well, because when we're talking about food, once a stimulus, like a stimulus reward association has been developed, it can be very hard to break. And in fact, it can actually even persist well beyond the point where the reward has diminished. So what do I mean by that? Let's say whenever you get stressed out, you reach for, one of those little tubs of Ben & Jerry's ice cream, and that presents a pretty significant reward for you. Okay, great, right? You have a certain stressor and you enact a certain behavior, you get a reward. Now, I'm not talking about whether or not that's good or bad, but that's the sequence. Over time, that reward is attenuating, which means that it goes down over time. So what does that mean? Well, you have to eat more and more to get the same reward. So you can see how it becomes very problematic over time if we're not aware of these things. Now, the last piece that we're going to touch on in this video is food addiction and how it relates to chemical addiction. So food addiction is distinct from chemical addiction, but they do share similar neurobiological pathways. Okay, so they are not the same, but there's definitely overlap. Being compelled to eat a certain food is a very strong compulsion sometimes for some people. I've definitely struggled with like food addiction and binge eating and a whole host of things. I struggled with that for many years, and luckily through my own education and through taking courses and all sorts of different things, I was able to get over that. I've helped many people get over that as well. Okay, but that was a difficult thing. So I know firsthand how hard it can be to say no to those things when you're in the moment. Okay. That being said, it's still not the same thing. And I just think it's incredibly disingenuous to try and compare them together, right? So it should be noted, however, that psychological stimulus can still have physiological outcomes. Here's what I mean by that. So, circumstance or incident that creates a very strong and compelling physiological response. Okay. Emotional triggers or situations can have physiological responses. So again, coming back to what we discussed in an earlier video, the biopsychosocial model, these things are all related. Your biology is inseparable from your physiology. And these things and how they interact with your environment, again, also inseparable. So it's important to understand the complexities of food addiction. It's important to understand the complexities of how you might think of things and how you might perceive things and how that actually affects your physiology. Because the more that you become aware of your own situation and how you're interacting with your environment, with your physiology, with your thoughts and your emotions, the better equipped you are to actually come up with more effective solutions.